When we think of slavery in America, our minds often go to the millions of Africans forced into bondage. But there's another chapter, one that's rarely discussed. Natives, too, were enslaved in staggering numbers. Before European encroachment, slavery among indigenous tribes was vastly different. It was not based on race, nor was it a lifetime condition. Instead, it was a fate reserved for prisoners of war, captives taken in battle, many of whom would ultimately be adopted into the tribe. Then came the Europeans. Colonizers saw natives as a labor force ripe for exploitation. Over the centuries, an estimated 5 million indigenous people were enslaved, compared to the 4 million Africans born into slavery in the U.S. Combine those with the more than 10 million slaves imported from Africa, and we find that roughly 1 in 4 slaves prior to the Emancipation Proclamation were indigenous. But the nature of their enslavement differed. African slavery was institutionalized, hereditary, and deeply racialized. Native slavery, on the other hand, was often hidden under legal loopholes, debt peonage, forced labor, and indentured servitude. When Europeans arrived, natives were initially enslaved as prisoners of war. However, over time they were taken and sold to plantations in the West Indies to clear land for English colonies. Even after slavery was abolished in 1865, natives continued to be enslaved because of manipulations of a few legal gray areas. The worst epidemic to ever befall the native population was Western laws. The brutality was undeniable. Indigenous people were captured, sold, and transported across the Americas. Some were forced into domestic servitude, others into grueling labor on plantations. Unlike African slaves, Native Americans were often seen as more difficult to control, leading to mass killings or forced removals instead of long-term enslavement. Both African and Native slaves suffered unimaginable cruelty. But while African slavery is widely acknowledged, the enslavement of indigenous peoples remains largely forgotten history. It's time we recognize the full scope of slavery in America, not just one chapter, but the whole book. Of late, there has been a trend of tearing down statues and scrubbing names from the sides of buildings, but it is important that we do not erase this sad chapter in our history. As George Santayana said, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. A powerful reminder that history holds lessons we ignore at our own peril. Those who want us to forget slavery someday hope to reinstitute it.